we know science, right? It's the thing we hear about in the news, and we also learn about it in our classrooms. But we don't often think about how science has become the way it is today, and how it's gotten to this point. It's an important question. You're watching another video from Science for Everyone, and this is part of our History of Scientific Knowledge collection, and today we talk about how science became science. Let's get started. A really natural starting point would just be the definition of science. So, science. It is a system of knowledge that allows us to explain our physical world or phenomenon that we might observe. Now, we do that through experimentation and observation, and believe it or not, we've been doing it from the very beginning of humankind. Think about ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, Babylon. These cultures were observing things from the very beginning. There were questions they had. Why does the sun disappear? Why does the moon appear? And how come the constellations of the stars look different from time to time? Now, these questions were meant to invoke these kinds of observations and explain the things that they couldn't, but they actually had a very deep connection to religion as well. A lot of creation stories, you'll notice, come from these kinds of observations of the sun, the stars, the moon, and there was a deep connection between science and religion at the time. But it was far more than that. Science was also used to better the lives of everyone. They used calendar systems to actually improve agricultural output in ancient Egypt. And in Babylon, there are records of medical research that actually improved the quality of life and actually allowed individuals to live perhaps longer than they expected back in the day as a result of discovery and experimentation. Now, those processes have become a lot more rigorous over time. And if we skip ahead to the scientific revolution, think Galileo, Copernicus, Newton, the interest of science shifted a little bit. No longer was science completely connected to the church. A lot of it was. But at this stage, people like Galileo, people like Copernicus, would say things that would go against the church, would be called heretics for their beliefs. For example, saying that the sun did not revolve around the earth and vice versa, it was actually the earth that revolved around the sun. Galileo was put under house arrest for those kinds of claims and beliefs. And those scientists of the time wanted to explain not just the physical observable world, but even the invisible world. Things like gravity for Newton, things like the principles of physics or atomic theory. Those are the kinds of things that interested people. What else could we explain? What else are we not seeing? If we skip ahead one more time, science went through another big change, and that is a profit incentive. During the Industrial Revolution, people were innovating and creating at lightning speed. And it wasn't always in the name of discovery and innovation, but it was also with the ulterior motive of how much money could we make off of these discoveries. Think to trains being run by steam, then being run by coal, and then being run by oil and gas, and to this day, we have electric trains even. Those kinds of developments exist to increase efficiency and yes, improve human life, but also to serve a profit motive for a company that develops them. And this isn't always a good thing. We've seen in the early 1900s, actually, where a lot of medical science was actually duds or fakes, where they tried to sell you a product that was researched but doesn't actually help you. And this might actually sound eerily similar to similar products that exist to this day that promise you healing, promise you that you'll be never sick again, and they probably don't live up to those promises. Science now had an ulterior motive through the Industrial Revolution, and it does to this day. So that's how science evolved. But what had to evolve with science to make sure that we were doing the right thing at the right time? One of the things is ethics. And ethics and science have a tumultuous history. There are a few learned lessons along the way and some very difficult topics to speak about that need to be brought to light when it comes to science and ethics. Henrietta Lacks was a cancer patient whose cells were taken, harvested, and then used for research without her or her family's consent or knowledge. And those cells actually came about tons and tons of research, and many discoveries have existed only because of those cells that were taken unjustly without her consent or knowledge. There's other examples of more heinous crimes. There's something called Pernkopf's Atlas, which is a depiction of human anatomy with very, very specific detail that hadn't been done to that level at that time. And the only reason that was ever created was because of the human experimentation performed by Nazi Germany on prisoners of war. Think to things like Unit 731, where East and Southeast Asians were tortured, captured, and experimented on as human experimentation projects were meant to try and improve the qualities of medical research and surgery techniques. This is a difficult part of human history that needs to be brought to light because we need to make sure we never make those mistakes again. And that's why science has made ethics a main part and main consideration in everything we do. Now there's rigorous testing and rigorous application processes that we have to go through to even start a scientific project. Another more positive thing that has changed science is the idea of collaboration. There's a lot of scientists in this day that are very specialized, but that wasn't actually always the case. If you've ever heard of Pythagoras, and he was actually not just someone who studied triangles and mathematics, but he was also a philosopher, but he was also even a religious leader in his circles. Now, we don't often see mathematician, religious leader, philosophers today. And in fact, we see quite the opposite. Within science specifically, we see people who are specialized within one particular group of proteins in a human being, or they're specialized in one particular animal or one particular plant. And these kinds of specializations hold value because the questions that we have left to answer have become so specific and have become so unique. We need these specialists to answer those questions. But more than that, we have collaboration that we can rely on. When Charles Darwin was doing research on evolutionary theory, he kind of took the reins for things that involved geology, biology, and a lot of other ologies. But nowadays, if we did a similar project, we would have a whole team of anthropologists and sociologists and biologists and geologists and all the other ologists as well. And there's a huge benefit from being able to have this level of collaboration because we hear more voices, we have more perspectives, we have more expertise. And that's definitely something that's changed for the better. And the last thing that science has really changed is this idea of transparency and accountability. It's not like anyone can post anything and be revered for it. And yes, with the internet era, you could technically post anything anywhere, but that doesn't necessarily always mean you get a platform. To be published on a rigorous academic journal where people will read your work, will cite your work, you need to go through peer editing processes where you will also be fact-checked, where you'll also have to be accountable for the work that you do. And these levels of security is to make sure that people don't misrepresent data, where people make sure that you aren't lying about your findings. These are all definitely good things towards the future of science. So where does that leave us today? Science has come a long way. That's where it leaves us today. It has truly come a long way, and probably for the better in almost every aspect. But there's still so much to do. It wasn't until very recently where one company out of dozens upon dozens finally had a settlement with the family of Henrietta Lacks for those cells that were taken and used unjustly without their consent. Just one. There are dozens of companies that still have not reached out for those kinds of settlements. So there are those aspects, but there are also positive aspects in terms of what we can do for science in the future. The fact that there's so much information sharing, the fact that there's so much data that can be collected, that people work and build off of each other's discoveries, and actually even will challenge other people's discoveries to make sure we find out what the truth of the matter is, or what the most proven answer to a question is. We need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We need to make sure we're ethical. We need to make sure we're accountable. But we also need to make sure we continue to collaborate, because that is the best way we can move on into the future. So we need to praise good science, because science and discovery and innovation can never come at the cost of human ethics or human well-being. Thanks for watching.